I'm doing a video on China, so naturally before we begin I have to say, Drew Pavlou, get your fat little fingers away from your phone. This video isn't what you think it is. We wrote this intro assuming that by the time it gets uploaded, Drew would be in jail for sitting outside the Chinese consulate. Which if that does happen to you, Drew, little tip, don't bag the top bunk, okay? With your hefty frame, you will kill the poor murderer underneath you who was only trying to bum you. Is that such a crime? In case you're wondering why there's so many fat jokes at the beginning of a video about China, it's purely because this barely famous attention prostitute lolcow who gets triggered anytime we say anything international because he lives in this fantasy that he's a UN delegate. So the only thing that angers him more than us talking about China is pointing out that if he stepped foot on Taiwan, he'd probably sink it. And that's good because that way no one gets it. Trust me, he really gets triggered when you call him fat. He's like an ethnic Cartman. Look, he's a little taste. You're just a piggy.
That's not even funny. That's just harsh. That's a personal attack. That's a personal attack. Ad hominem. It's an ad hominem fallacy. This was completely unprovoked. It's fully unprovoked. Just literally attacking somebody, an innocent bloke for no reason. Thoughts?
True.
Yeah. Thoughts. Yeah.
Also, yes, in case you haven't noticed, I am stalling for time because I'm preparing myself for the inevitable comments that'll come with this video, like Jordies not churning out CIA anti-China talking points. Neoliberal. I fucking knew it. Friendly Jordies is being paid by them bloody Japs to talk about how good China is. And of course the classic, you are a Finally, some criticism based on the facts. Before we begin this, let's cushion this one in the indisputable fact. China is Australia's biggest trading partner. Even bigger than Hong Kong, which, oh no, that's also part of China now, Drew. Oh, that's 3 things that would trigger you in one video. I know what'll cheer you up. Food. All right, that's probably enough. Poor little piggy squealed enough. But that's crucial, right? This is our biggest trading partner, and yet when our Prime Minister meets with Xi Jinping, I think David Cameron copped less flack for maybe fucking a pig. And I don't mean Drew either. Oh no, there's more fat jokes, dude. Albo went to China and copped this for weeks. Why did you meet with Xi before Trump? Because Trump snubbed him twice? Who the fuck cares what order you meet world leaders in? Is this some sort of secretive reverse video game where you start with the final boss and work your way up to the Goomba? This is the second fact that is just as true as the first. China will become even more important to Australia than it already is. Now you can see why this video will be hated. I guess on the upside though, I will earn one of those nicknames that we give any politician that has a dodgy link to China. Might I suggest Jiangsu Jordies, friendly to Beijing Jordies. But we're going to try and push ahead and give you a sober explanation as to how China's government and economy works, because it will make us more money in the future than even when the UFC decided to come to Australia. Whoa! Waleed was mean to Baldylocks. F*** you, Waleed. Even though you're off air, f*** you. There you go, a non-controversial internet opinion to balance this video out. Despite these 2 things being true, isn't it astonishing how little we know about China? Like, most people watching this right now, you'd know who this is, and what the fuck? You shouldn't know that even if you're American. But I bet none of you know who this is. And fair enough, because he's not even in China's National People's Congress. In fact, he's not even a man. That is an AI-generated image. But that's exactly my point. I could pop up any Chinese-looking man and you'd be like, is that the, deputy dictator? Yes. Who'd have thought it's Colonel Sanders? By the way, if you didn't know who that was, it's Franklin the Turtle, the senior citizen years. But when it comes to China, though, most of us wouldn't even know that their parliament is called the National People's Congress. We couldn't name Xi Jinping's predecessor. In fact, I bet that most of us only have one fact at hand about China, which is, did you know you can see the Great Wall of China from space?
You can't actually.
Oh. Also, while we're here, dim sims are not from China either. What? Yeah, actually, they're from Canada.
Really?
No. What you really need to know about China, though, is we're not so different. Looming property bubble, they got that. E-girls, chronically online needs, unemployed Gen Z workers. I mean, you've all been in an internet cafe. It's just that times a billion. So, they're facing the same literal first world problems as the rest of us. The only remarkable difference being, you look at China's rise in history, they shouldn't have first world problems. To quickly speed run through 2,000 years of Chinese history, as I'm sure you're aware, China used to be an imperial state. Various ruling dynasties came and went, with one common factor between them being that disasters and political turmoil sealed their fate. They came up with a theory of the mandate of heaven that argued that natural disasters and revolt were a sign that the gods no longer wanted the ruling dynasty in power, which, hey, that also applies to Australia too. See? another thing we have in common. The gods must have really wanted the Chinese to know when an emperor's time is up, because the crises that weakened, if not completely sank, numerous Chinese dynasties were, let's face it, abject disasters. Some of the deadliest conflicts in human history were those that took place in China, including the Taiping Rebellion, which killed more people than World War I. What was that rebellion about, you may ask? Some dude who failed his civil service test had some awakening and thought he was the brother of Jesus Christ and started a giant cult centered around himself. When his cult developed ambitions to overthrow the imperial government, they succeeded in starting a massive civil war that killed around 20 to 30 million people, and Australia's worth of people died in China because some guy believed he was God's divinely appointed representative on Earth. Which, what? Didn't he know that I was going to exist one day? But you got to admit, that's a point of democracy's favor, as here you find out the easy way whether or not you're appointed by God. The war that led to the collapse of the Ming dynasty and its replacement with the Manchu-led Qing dynasty also killed another Australia's worth of people, but look at this guy. He invented anime! There's a lot to discuss about each dynasty, but I'm going to focus on the last one, the Qing dynasty, is what happened to China during the Qing dynasty explains why China is the way it is today. Europeans began exploring the world, and with that came missionaries and traders coming to China. Europeans wanted Chinese silk, tea, porcelain, but the Chinese only wanted one thing from Europeans, silver. They also wanted them to not try and convert them to Christianity, but fuck you, it's clearly the right answer, specifically the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. The Qing dynasty came from the Manchu ethnic group of northeastern China, who are culturally distinct from China's majority ethnic group, the Han people. The Manchus wanted to prove their supremacy over the Hans. Remember that haircut that you see on those Chinese guys in 1800s cartoons? That is the traditional Manchu haircut, jealously replicated today by lebs in the western suburbs of Sydney. A mane for a mane? The Qing dynasty forced the rest of China to, as your dad would say, get a haircut to prove their loyalty to them. And what a purity test that is, because that haircut's fucked. The Qing even banned private ships traveling in and out of China in a bid to stop Chinese people from immigrating and joining overseas anti-Qing movements. This ban on sea traffic also guaranteed the state had an effective monopoly on trade with foreign countries. As to further limit any unwanted cultural influence, they only allowed foreign traders to conduct trade in the city of Canton. See, this is how Oz-pilled we are. As soon as I said that, your ears pricked up, didn't they? What? Canton? Fuck yeah, this video just got interesting. The city's now Guangzhou. It probably made the clothes you're currently wearing, which I assume, because it's my audience, it's this. This really started to piss off European powers because they really wanted to trade directly with suppliers deeper within China rather than be restricted to trading with this handful of government-sanctioned trading houses in Canton. China's isolation also had the unintended effect of slowing down China's technological and social development because China, and by extension Korea and Japan, initially refused to absorb much of these strange round-eyed fucks customs, and European powers were also running out of silver to trade with China. So the Brits came up with the genius idea of selling opium instead, in exchange for all the shit they wanted from China, which, thank fuck, international law now exists and stops the Chinese from selling ice to us, because you just know that Newcastle would have had one word to that deal. It's not really a word. Things got that bad in China that it was estimated at one point 10% of the population were opium users, so that's another 2 Australias. Every time I see an opium den though, I could see why. Ooh, comfy boys. Look at them. Too cool to get boners. When China wanted to block opium imports, war broke out between China and Britain, and this began a period in Chinese history called, how's this, the Century of Humiliation, where European powers repeatedly threatened war with China and demanded concessions such as trade privileges, land cessions, and granted special rights for their people living in China. With Japan really fucking China up in the early half of the 20th century and into World War II, this has all left a massive scar in the Chinese mind, which is why to this day you have a deep distrust of foreign powers and foreigners as a whole. Which, God, I wish they didn't. So we could fuck them in further trade deals for more Canton! Unfortunately, they've grown wily to the round eyes tricks, and when you combine that with the experience of repeated rebellions, civil wars, and other catastrophes that killed tens of millions of people, you can understand why naturally, whatever the ideology the Chinese state would eventually take, they would like the idea of being centralized and authoritarian, just to consolidate itself among the thousands of threats that are ready to splinter it. The Chinese government knows that the next big social or political crisis that hits China might collapse the entire country and kill the zillions of people that live there with it. I don't necessarily agree with using strong-arm blanket legislation that they do use to guarantee social cohesion, but it is more nuanced than someone like a Drew Pavlou figure just saying it. Oh wait, he actually acknowledges the very point I just made. Gay squealer! You can see how Mao gained popularity by sticking it to the imperialists now, can't you? Anyway, Mao's rule was widely uneventful. Triggered global politics redditors? Yup. We're skipping over the entire thing just to piss you off. This one's for you. Go complain to all your friends. Oh, you don't have any. Shortly after Mao's death, the de facto leader of China, who, you know how I remember him, it's this old Rodney Rude joke of him saying, his name sounds like a fucking pinball machine. Dong Chao Ping. But in a lot of ways, this guy was the Chinese version of Paul Keating, a neoliberal, which is a dig at the other insufferable camp that always lurk these videos that seem to think that anything that isn't Maoism is neoliberalism. But no, really the reason that he and Keating are similar is because at their core, they both believe, as all effective leaders do, that it doesn't matter if a cat is black or white so long as it catches mice. That's what I'm talking about, Neats. That's good government right there. Ideologically agnostic, results oriented. This pinball machine implemented massive economic reforms that set China on its current developmental trajectory, as he realised that Maoist-style collectivism did not improve the living standards of the Chinese people and was doomed to fail even if they kept pushing on with it anyway. So his solution was to open up China's economy to foreign investment so that they could get the capital and know-how to build competitive and functioning industries. Knowing that Hong Kong was already facilitating lots of trade and intellectual capital flows between China and the rest of the world, China set up its first special economic zones to foreigners in southern China, and what Deng did was ensure that China would get the best of both worlds, access to foreign capital and know-how, but also the ability of the central government to have as much flexibility in dictating where that capital goes. And that's the winning formula that China still uses today. The benefit of that system is that the state can literally decide tomorrow, Mona boo boo dolls! And all those companies that are financed, if not directly controlled by the CCP, will respond quickly to the economic policy directives of the Chinese government, and as a result, they can plan ahead. And that planning is the reason why they are kicking the asses of most other developed economies. This is why they are able to build a functioning city and nationwide train network in the span of a few years, while in Australia, we're still waiting for, nah, that pool fence is a bit short, start the DA again. Free nation. To further demonstrate my point, look at the EV industry. 25 years ago, basically the only cars China produced were these cars for ants. Even Chinese people were like, aha, cheap Chinese shit. They were smart enough to realize that they couldn't compete with the car manufacturing giants of the West and Japan, South Korea, Africa. But what they did do 25 years ago was put money into developing an EV industry, knowing that other countries had already placed their bets on traditional internal combustion engine vehicles, and that it was a case of when, not if, fossil fuel powered cars would become unsustainable environmentally and economically. Look at how that decision paid off. Poorly. Because what happens when the sun stops blowing? Hey? This, by the way, is another thing the Labour Party has in common with the commies. Sky News was right to warn you that it's not just the colour. They also invest in industries designed to pay off decades down the track. 20 to 30 years ago, China made low-quality consumer goods for the world. 10 years after that, they were already making everything, including actual high-quality products like drones and phones, some of which were designed and engineered by Chinese companies. Now, they're almost on the same level as the US. They're the only other country that has big tech companies and is independently developing locally designed commercial generative AI models. They can export their locally designed technology to the rest of the world. The most used social media platform for Zoomers are Chinese. China makes most of the world's renewable infrastructure, and more advanced economies are warming up to Chinese design and produced consumer goods. Except me, I'll stick with the Australian social media platform, thank you very much. Yahoo 7, love it or leave it. But you couldn't have imagined that even several years ago. Just like several years ago, you couldn't have imagined the US collapsing this fast, but inversely, short-term planning, that's what happens when your entire political system is based off surviving the next 2 years instead of thinking about the next 200. I mean, gee, imagine what the Nazis could have accomplished with their 1,000 years of foresight. Really, what the US has been doing, and I'd argue all they could do, is ride off the coattails of its post-World War II economic Mario mushroom boost, and using that to leverage its geopolitical influence to stop other countries from getting the upper hand. And you can only play that game for so long. One day the cockroaches will get immune to the poison. It worked for a while. When high-quality imports, especially those from Japan, threatened American industry in the 1980s, the Reagan administration forced the group of 5 countries to strengthen their local currencies to rebalance the trade deficit that America ran. In the case of Japan, the signing of the Plaza Accords played no small role in contributing to the asset bubble that burst and left Japan unable to seriously grow its economy for 30 years, which you could possibly say may have enforced the already entrenched suspicions the Chinese have of foreigners' intentions, and certainly didn't help the US's image to its allies that it's an honest actor that wants to build up its network of trading partners, and definitely solidified in China's mind that it doesn't want to rely on the US by fitting into the trading and finance system that they made for their own benefit. So they built their own trading system with blackjack. for foreigners, no gambling for locals. I do like how heaps of Asian countries do that, and because they're so close to each other, they just fuck off to their neighbour to gamble. They're also intelligent enough to realise that there is a lot to be gained by building relations with emerging markets that will grow faster than the developed countries. Some critics say that China does this so that they can lure poorer countries into debt and imposing tough repayment conditions on them. I don't doubt that they are trying to gain influence, which could be used for malicious purposes with their global infrastructure spree. But man, if you're a developing nation, infrastructure's infrastructure. You can see why more of the global south is aligning with them instead of the west, just on that. But also, China builds lots of local infrastructure too, which they get criticised for constructing seemingly useless domestic infrastructure, but build it and they will come. What almost always ends up happening is that infrastructure does eventually become useful when people start moving further out of cities and into new cities that were constructed ahead of time. Too bad they're made of cardboard. I know I've been spruiking China a lot here, and that's clearly only because I want to go on an iShow speed style influencer state-sanctioned all-expenses paid trip to China. Yes, I actually did take an impromptu trip to China for like 3 days just to film that 2 seconds of footage. But look, there's no further explanation on that. That's all you get. The point is, the Chinese can build and make a lot of things, but there are valid concerns that certain booming industries like real estate and the EVs have entered bubble territory. It still remains to be said what will happen if these bubbles collapse, or if these bubbles will collapse at all. But again, it's not like in the West we don't have our own bubbles that our entire economy depends on not bursting. It's worth noting that because the Chinese government actually is more heavily involved in the economy, they have more flexibility in addressing market issues rather than doing what we seem to do in the West, which is wait for the crisis to kick in and then Other than that, they've got Japan-style aging population issues on the horizon, but the important question here is, what does this all mean for Australia? You know, the true alpha. I guess the even more important question is whether war with China is inevitable. And hold on, I gotta do this in the style of 60 Minutes.
Last week, Chinese warships were detected near Australian waters, causing alarm and panic.
I found it very alarming.
The question now on everyone's mind is war with China inevitable? The answer will be given away in the preview.
Yes, I think it is. Will China flex their military muscles on us every now and then? Probably, especially for as long as we choose to remain allied with the US. If war breaks out between China and the US, it'll be bad news for us. If we inevitably get involved, it'll be even worse. But I'm a Buddhist about this shit, mostly because our desert allows me to be. The logistics of a full-on invasion of Australia doesn't work in China's favor. It's kind of like invading Russia, but hot. Also, if we had to, how fucking easy would it be for us to burn all our crops? A naval blockade would be great. That means we don't have to burn our crops, because I think we're good for wheat beaks. I'd say we'd miss high-end goods, but not only do we have ample food, we've got ample cash converters too. We're what they call in the international community a self-sufficient nation. China could probably do a lot of damage by launching bombing attacks on Australia if they develop their power to exert naval and air power from beyond their seas. If they succeed in building military installations in the Pacific, then they stand a good chance of being able to exert military pressure on Australia. This is why Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong have been working tirelessly to rebuild relations with small Pacific Island nations that have been neglected by 10 years of coalition rule. The Liberals' strategy of saying incendiary shit against our biggest trading partner for headlines in the Murdoch press. I mean, Jesus, talk about short-term thinking. So much goodwill destroyed so they get a Dutton does it again. Not really understanding the irony of that statement. Diplomatically reckless, while as we saw, rolling out the red carpet for the shonkiest Chinese business interests behind the scenes, they really are what the Murdoch press always pretends the Labour is. They are completely compromised by Chinese interests, but the shittest interests, like visa agency interests. Anyone coming into power in this country that's remotely sensible will realise, whether they like it or not, they've got to live with China. They have to make a productive relationship with China because so many industries in Australia, directly or indirectly, rely on trade and movement between China and Australia. So, does this mean that we have to be quiet about certain disagreements we have regarding issues like political freedom? Yes! It's the same reason we have to keep silent about Pine Gap. We are stuck under America's wing militarily, and that's just what you have to do when you're setting up a middle power like Australia for success. And anyone that pretends otherwise, come on. You sit there and tolerate your weed dealer incorrectly relaying Neil deGrasse Tyson talking points to you. You do the same thing, you fucking pussy. And so you should. When New Zealand refused to allow American nuclear vessels to enter its waters, the Americans ended military and intelligence cooperation with the Kiwis and downgraded existing political and diplomatic ties. Under Labour, we are mostly succeeding in playing the delicate balancing act of staying in the American sphere of influence while also maintaining our trade links with China. Whether we like it or not, they are going to become an increasingly powerful player in the Asia-Pacific region. Regardless of whether the Donald Trump MAGA movement disappears and the US gains the trust of the world again, the world as we know it is changing rapidly, way faster than we would have thought. Even a couple of years ago, it's faster than that. And in that environment, it is not advantageous for us to keep treating our primary trading partner as an adversary, which is why it's insane that the press, straight after the parliamentary break, Chairman Elbow meets with Chairman Ping Pong and pings around ideas on how to bring about a cultural revolution in Australia. Shut up and buy a Chairman Elbow shirt. Yes, I'm painfully aware that the design of this shirt does make a mockery of the core premise of this video. That's why I decided to wear it, c***s.
I was going to wear my Chairman Elbow shirt, but I was too scared to. But it is available, links below.